In the dead of winter, 1944, through the snow-choked forests of the Ardennes, a German Panther tank, the apex predator of its time, a mechanical god of war, grinds to a sudden, silent halt. Its crew, the elite of the Panzerwaffe, listen in horror not to the sound of an incoming shell, but to the gentle gurgle of an empty fuel tank. Moments later, the horizon fills with the silhouettes of dozens of American Sherman tanks. They are inferior machines in almost every way, but they are here, and they have gas. This single frozen moment is not an anomaly. It is a perfect microcosm of the entire Second World War. The story we think we know is one of tactical genius, wonder weapons, and bitter, bloody battles for every inch of ground. But the real story, the one that truly sealed the fate of the Third Reich, is far quieter. It's a story about what was written on a few mundane pieces of captured paper, a full year before this panther ran dry. A story about logistics, about numbers, and about a catastrophic refusal to believe in simple arithmetic. The war wasn't truly lost in the rubble of Stalingrad or on the beaches of Normandy. It was lost in a cramped intelligence office in Berlin, when two of Germany's most brilliant analysts stared at a captured American supply chart and came to a terrifying, mathematically certain conclusion. The war was already over. They just had to prove it, and their failure to do so would cost millions of lives. To understand the depth of their shock, we have to rewind. We have to see the world as the German High Command saw it in the triumphant years of 1939 to 1942. This was the era of the myth, the legend of the invincible Wehrmacht, a war machine that had redefined modern combat. Poland fell in weeks. France, a great military power with a massive army, collapsed in just 6. The swastika flew from the North Cape of Norway to the shores of Libya. German engineering was supreme. Their tanks, the Panzer IV, and later the dreaded Tiger and Panther, were masterpieces of design, combining thick armor with lethally accurate, high-velocity cannons. Their soldiers were arguably the best trained in the world, hardened by years of preparation and led by a professional officer corps steeped in centuries of Prussian military tradition. Their tactical doctrine, the Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, was a symphony of coordinated violence that no one seemed able to counter. Germany wasn't just winning, it was rewriting the rules of war itself. And what of their future enemy across the Atlantic? America was a sleeping giant, but to the Nazi leadership, it was a lazy, decadent one. A nation of jazz music, Hollywood movies, and comfortable consumerism. In May of 1940, President Franklin D. Roosevelt stood before Congress and made a proclamation that, when it reached Berlin, was met with utter contempt. He announced that America would begin producing 50,000 military aircraft per year. The head of the Luftwaffe, Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, a man not known for his humility, reportedly laughed out loud. The Americans, he scoffed, were experts at making refrigerators and razor blades. How could a nation of shopkeepers and factory workers, who in 1939 had produced fewer than 3,000 military planes, suddenly conjure 50,000 from thin air? This wasn't just arrogance. To the Germans, it seemed like a violation of the laws of physics. Germany itself had been on a war footing since 1933. Under its 4-year plan, the entire economy had been re-engineered for military production. They had pushed their factories to their limits, conscripted labor, and stripped occupied nations of resources. To them, they were operating at the absolute peak of what an industrial nation could achieve. Roosevelt's numbers weren't just propaganda, they were a fantasy. What the German leadership failed to grasp was a fundamental structural difference between their economy and America's. Germany in 1940 was a nation at full stretch. America, by contrast, was a coiled spring. The Great Depression, while a human tragedy, had left the United States with an enormous reserve of untapped potential. Factories sat idle. Millions of skilled machinists, welders, and engineers were unemployed or underemployed. An entire industrial infrastructure, the largest on the planet, was simply waiting for the order to switch on. When Roosevelt called for 50,000 planes, he wasn't asking America to build an arsenal from scratch. He was asking it to convert its existing, colossal power from making cars to making tanks, from making tractors to making bombers. The German myth was built on the idea of their own efficiency and might. The setup for their downfall was their complete, utter inability to comprehend an industrial scale that was not just larger than theirs, but operated on an entirely different plane of reality. They saw a nation of razor blades. They were about to be hit by a tidal wave of steel. The first cracks in the German myth appeared not in Europe, but on the dusty plains of North Africa. When American forces landed in Operation Torch in November 1942, German commanders expected to face a green, poorly equipped amateur army. And at first, they were right. At battles like Kasserine Pass, veteran German units inflicted humiliating defeats on the inexperienced Americans. German tactical superiority was proven once again. But experienced commanders like General Erwin Rommel noticed something deeply unsettling. The Americans were wasteful. An American unit that was shattered in the morning would be fully re-equipped and back in the fight by evening. Trucks were abandoned for minor mechanical faults because it was easier to get a new one than to fix the old. The sheer volume of their equipment was staggering. Rommel sent increasingly alarmed reports back to Berlin, noting that a single American infantry division had more trucks than an entire German panzer corps. He wrote of captured supply dumps that contained more food, fuel, and ammunition than his entire army group possessed. His warnings were dismissed. Rommel was a pessimist, they said, always exaggerating enemy strength to demand more resources for himself. The leadership in Berlin, cocooned by their ideology of willpower and martial superiority, filed the reports away. Anecdotes from a complaining general were not enough to shake their worldview. But then came the invasion of Italy in 1943. And with it, the first domino fell, not on the battlefield, but in the paper trail that followed. Allied forces pushed into Italy, and in the chaos of the fighting, German units began capturing American administrative outposts, supply depots, and headquarters. And with them, they captured documents. These weren't secret battle plans or encrypted communications. They were the most mundane, bureaucratic paperwork imaginable. Fuel requisitions, ammunition delivery manifests, vehicle replacement forms. Stamped, signed in triplicate, filled with boring columns of numbers. These papers began to filter back through intelligence channels, eventually landing on a desk in the Bendler Block building in Berlin, the nerve center of German military intelligence. It was there, in November 1943, that two colonels, Reinhard Gehlen of Foreign Armies East and Alexis von Rönne of Foreign Armies West, sat down to review them. These men were the antithesis of the Nazi ideologues. They were professional Prussian analysts, men who dealt in facts, data, and cold, objective reality. They spread the captured forms across the desk. For a week, they cross-referenced them, checked the math, and desperately searched for some error, some sign of deception or propaganda. There was none. The forms were authentic. and the numbers they contained told a story so apocalyptic that it made the defeat at Stalingrad look like a minor setback. One document, a monthly supply report for a single American Army Corps in Italy, about 80,000 men, contained the mathematical proof that Germany could not win the war. The turning point of the Second World War wasn't a battle. It was the moment two intelligence officers realized they were fighting against arithmetic. And arithmetic always wins. What Gehlen and von Röhne conducted in that Berlin office was a forensic autopsy of the American war machine. And what they found defied every principle of war as they knew it. Let's dissect the evidence as they did, piece by horrifying piece. First, they looked at fuel. The captured report showed that one American corps of 80,000 men received 3.2 million gallons of gasoline and 800,000 gallons of diesel in 1 month. Gehlen, whose focus was the titanic struggle against the Soviet Union, did a quick comparison. Army Group Center, a colossal formation of over 500,000 men fighting on the Eastern Front, received less fuel in a month than this single American corps. It wasn't a marginal difference. It was an order of magnitude. The Wehrmacht's blitzkrieg was being starved by fuel shortages, while American GIs were using gasoline to clean engine parts and run generators for movie nights. Then came the ammunition figures. The same American corps received 15,000 tons of artillery ammunition in that month. A well-supplied German corps might receive 2,000 tons. This meant for every single shell a German battery could fire, its American counterpart could fire 7. And this wasn't for a specific, massive offensive. This was just their regular Tuesday. American artillery wasn't just supporting their troops. It was burying the Germans under an inescapable mountain of high explosives. Tactical skill becomes irrelevant when you can't lift your head out of your foxhole. Perhaps most damning of all were the replacement figures for vehicles. This wasn't about new units being formed. This was just replacing routine losses from combat and mechanical failure. In 1 month of normal operations, this American corps received 847 new trucks, 127 jeeps, and 43 tanks. The entire German war industry, across all fronts, produced fewer tanks in the previous month than this single American corps received as routine replacements. The German analysts understood the horrifying implication immediately. You could destroy an American tank, but you weren't defeating an army. You were just creating a temporary inconvenience in their supply chain. A new tank, fresh from a factory in Detroit, was already on a ship, ready to take its place. A destroyed German Tiger, by contrast, was a national catastrophe. A loss that might not be replaced for months, if ever. This was the ripple effect of the captured documents. They triggered a frantic, wider investigation. Von Röhne tasked his agents to gather every scrap of data on American industrial production. The numbers that came back were even worse. They looked at tanks. In 1943, Germany, with all its renowned engineering prowess, produced around 11,600 tanks. It was a Herculean effort that required the total mobilization of their industry. In that same year, the United States produced 37,198. More than 3 to 1. German analysts studied a captured manual from the Chrysler tank arsenal in Detroit. A single factory. It employed assembly line techniques perfected for building family sedans. At its peak, this one factory was producing almost 900 M4 Sherman tanks a month. That single American factory was outproducing the entire German nation's tank industry. The Sherman was an inferior tank to the Panther or Tiger one-on-one. But the war wasn't a series of duels. It was a grim equation. A Tiger might destroy 5 Shermans, but what happened when the 6th, 7th, and 8th Sherman rolled over the hill? Quantity, they were discovering, has a quality all its own. They looked at aircraft. In 1943, the Luftwaffe received about 20,000 new planes. America built nearly 86,000, more than 4 to 1. Goering's laughter had turned to ash. The skies over Europe didn't belong to the Allies because of better pilots or superior planes, though they had those too. The skies belonged to them because American factories could build aircraft faster than the Luftwaffe could shoot them down. But the truly decisive battle, the one that rendered all other numbers moot, was the Battle of the Atlantic. Germany's grand strategy hinged on Admiral Donitz's U-boats. They were the one weapon that could sever the lifeline between American factories and the European battlefield. If they could sink ships faster than the Allies could build them, all that production meant nothing. In 1942, they came terrifyingly close to succeeding, sinking over 6 million tons of Allied shipping. It was a devastating blow. Yet Allied shipping capacity actually increased. The German analysts investigated and discovered the reason. A humble, ugly, mass-produced cargo vessel called the Liberty ship. German naval architects scoffed at the initial intelligence reports. The Americans claimed they could build one of these 10,000-ton ships in just 42 days. It was impossible. Shipbuilding was a craft, taking months, even years. But the Americans weren't building ships. They were manufacturing them. They used welding instead of time-consuming riveting. They prefabricated massive sections, the bow, the stern, the engine room, in parallel, and then assembled them like giant Lego blocks. They applied the logic of the Ford Motor Company to the shipyard. The results were insane. At their peak, American yards were launching 3 Liberty ships per day. One ship, the SS Robert E. Peary, was built as a publicity stunt in an unbelievable 4 days and 15 hours. While German U-boat crews were celebrated as heroes for sinking a ship, America was building ships more than 7 times faster than Germany could sink them. The Battle of the Atlantic wasn't lost by the U-boat crews. It was lost to the American welders. Gehlen and von Röhne gathered all this data: steel production, 3 to 1 in America's favor; truck production, 6 to 1; oil production, over 20 to 1, and compiled it into a comprehensive, clinical, and undeniable report. Their conclusion, delivered to the German High Command in December 1943, was stark. Based on the current industrial balance, victory was a mathematical impossibility. The war of attrition was a contest Germany was guaranteed. They weren't presenting an opinion. They were presenting a calculation. And here, the ripple effect hit a brick wall. Hitler, upon seeing the report, flew into a rage. He called it defeatist propaganda. He insisted that German willpower, the superiority of the Aryan spirit, and new wonder weapons would overcome any material disadvantage. His generals and cronies, either through genuine belief or fear, echoed his delusion. They pointed to their tactical victories, to the quality of their Tiger tanks, and dismissed the numbers as American lies. The report was filed away and ignored. The men who saw the truth were silenced. The German war machine, now proven to be on a path to certain annihilation, would continue to fight for another 17 bloody months. The analysts had done their job. They had uncovered the truth. But the truth was not welcome. The deadliest enemy Germany faced was not the Red Army or the U.S. 8th Air Force. It was their own leadership's willful blindness. The aftermath of that ignored report is a story of personal tragedy and historical irony. Colonel Alexis von Röhne, the man who tried to force the High Command to face reality, was arrested for his loose connections to the July 20th plot to assassinate Hitler. He was a conservative Prussian aristocrat, not a revolutionary, But in the paranoid death throes of the Third Reich, that didn't matter. He was executed in October 1944. Germany had literally killed the messenger. Colonel Reinhard Gehlen, the pragmatist, survived. As the Reich crumbled, he carefully microfilmed his intelligence files on the Soviet Union and buried them. After the surrender, he turned himself over to the Americans and traded his invaluable knowledge for a new job. The man who had once served Hitler's intelligence service would go on to build and lead West Germany's intelligence agency, the BND, becoming a key player for the West in the Cold War. His data was simply too valuable to discard. But the true legacy of this story is not about the fate of two men. It's about the fundamental shift in the nature of warfare they were the first to fully document. World War II was the moment war ceased to be purely a contest of tactics and courage, and became, first and foremost, a contest of production. It was the moment the factory floor became as important as the front line, and the logistics officer as critical as the general. The war was won by spreadsheets, by inventory lists, and by the nations that could simply build more, faster. The United States didn't just outfight Germany, it buried it under an avalanche of its own industrial output. And this leads to the timeless, universal lesson, a warning that echoes from that Berlin office to our world today. It is the profound danger of willful blindness. It's the catastrophic cost of choosing a comforting ideology over inconvenient data, of preferring a triumphant narrative to cold, hard numbers. The German leadership had all the information they needed to know the war was lost by the end of 1943. Accepting that truth could have saved millions of lives, German and Allied, and prevented the utter destruction of their nation. But they were trapped in their own myth, unable to conceive of a world where their supposed superiority didn't matter. They preferred the fantasy of ultimate victory to the reality of the balance sheet. The tragedy is not simply that they lost. The tragedy is that the loss was predictable, it was documented, and the proof sat in a file, ignored, while the world burned. History is often told as a story of great men, decisive battles, and heroic deeds. But sometimes, the most important stories, the ones that truly change the world, are found in the margins, written in the quiet, undeniable language of numbers. The humble American supply manifest proved to be a more powerful weapon than the Tiger tank, not because it could destroy anything, but because it revealed everything. It showed that in the brutal arithmetic of modern industrial war, courage is a virtue, tactics are a skill, but logistics is destiny. What do you think? What other boring documents or seemingly minor details have completely altered the course of history? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to explore more of the hidden stories that shaped our world, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. Thank you for watching.